Hi
Hello.
everyone, welcome. Thank you very much for joining today's Qesher presentation. My name is Dora. I'm one of the organizers of Qesher, and the other one is Sebastian. You can also find him here. It's just two of us who started this project almost 6 years ago, and thank you for all of you who keep joining us and who are regulars and members and lovely to have you all here, and we really appreciate your ongoing support and presence. And just for the sake of those who are joining us for the first time, I'll just say very briefly a few words about us. Kesher means connection in Hebrew, and our mission has been ever since we started this project to share Jewish stories, history, culture, present day life of different Jewish communities from all over the world. So we try to cover different continents, different cities, countries, places where there's Jewish life and share about their history and heritage. You probably all know that we also have a book club series, which obviously we try to introduce books that are somehow relevant to this topic. Today, we're very happy to welcome Dahlia Abraham-Klein, who's going to share with us about her fifth book, which is I'm just going to pull up quickly to not make any mistakes, The Stateless Central Asian Merchant. And she's going to speak about this book, but she's written several other books, one of which we also introduced in the past, The Caravan of Hope, which speaks about also her own family. She's a writer on Central Asian Jewish history and Jewish values. Her articles have appeared in Tablet, Chabad.org, Jewish Journal, and the Times of Israel. She's a teacher at Partners in Torah, offering a personalized learning experience on the system of life through Jewish wisdom. Her books include Caravan of Hope, a Bukharan's woman's journey to freedom, and Silk Road Vegetarian. And she also has two more books. And then the fifth one, The Stateless Central Asian Merchant. We are very happy to include this story on Qesher program because it's so interesting. We're fascinated by all the journeys of Dahlia's family. And now I'm going to pass the word to her, and she's going to share more about the book and about the family story. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And of course, after the presentation, we'll open up for Q&A.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you to Dora and Sebastian for once again hosting me. About 2 years ago, we presented Caravan of Hope, a Bukharan woman's journey to freedom. That book was written as a novel, and that was on my mother's life, who was born in a Soviet Uzbekistan prison in 1933. As I was writing my mother's life story, I needed context to help me write her story out and flesh it out. And I had my grandfather's journal, which was written in Judeo Persian with Rashi script, that combination. And we found a translator in Israel in the year 2000 to send it to. And we sent the journal. Can everyone see me clearly, by the way? Because I don't see myself. I just want to make sure. We
Yes.
sent it to Israel to have it translated. It was translated to Hebrew. It sat on the hard drive for 20 years. Nobody read the journal for 20 years. And I said, as I was writing my mother's book, which was released in 2023, let me look at my grandfather's journal and see if there's anything that to help me flesh out her story. So when I started to read his story in Hebrew, it was translated into Hebrew, I said, I cannot believe the story that I was reading. And I immediately knew that I had to publish it. And in fact, the vision I had was a movie. That's the vision I had, that I could see this actually being on film because it was so detailed and so vivid. It spans 100 years. His story spans 100 years. He was born in 1897 and he actually starts from 1897 and he goes all the way till 1986. That was the last journal entry, and he passed away in 1999. The way that I got the journal is when he passed away in February of 1999, I moved into his apartment with my son, and in the clean out was the journal. And I'll show you the actual journal. And the book, if any of you have the book, Hold on a second. If any of you have the book, um, the front cover is actually a page from the journal, and that's the actual page from the journal. So it's Judeo-Farsi using Rashi script, which was very typical in Central Asia. So in this entire journal, there's a few things to note that's very interesting about the journal. Once you grab hold of it, you'll find very interesting. In the journal, he doesn't write with any margins. You know how we write, we use margins, the lines on the paper. He just goes from right to left all the way, and he uses every single inch of the paper. There's maybe a period, but there's no paragraphs. It just goes on and on and on. And I felt that in itself was something very interesting to me because it showed his efficiency as well. That's how he was thinking because he was a merchant. So it shows his efficiency in the way that he's using the paper, that he's just using every single centimeter of the paper. So the journal spans about 100 years, about a century of his life. I titled the book A Stateless Central Asian Merchant. I realized after I titled the book, because he was stateless and he was a Central Asian merchant, and a big part of the journal is the merchant stories, which in itself shares a lot about Central Asian Jewish life. I realized many people have said this to me that this is a book about resiliency, about survival, how the Jewish people survived for thousands of years. And it's more a book of inspiration and a how to. You know, and if I had to think of another title, perhaps, but it's really about if you can extrapolate from the stories and understand the resilience and his he picks himself up and just moves forward, and there's no bitterness in any way that he writes. He writes his life story like he's an observer of his own life. You don't feel any, and there's a lot of tragedy, but you don't feel the tragedy because he's not expressing it. I mean, he probably became very stoic. I did know my grandfather, by the
By
way.
the
I
way,
knew
I knew
him
him.
till he passed away. So a good 30 years I knew him. But once I started to read the journal, I didn't know anything about him because all of this was not shared. In fact, when my family read the journal, it was incredulous because we all knew him and we didn't know these stories. So it was just somehow, and I think that was part of his survival as well. In his case, I think that he did not let his past hold him back. In fact, it was the fuel to push him forward. But I think looking back, he started to write his life story down at the age of 90, and he passed away at 102. And when you read the journal, if you've read it, there is so much detail in the journal at 90 years old. To have that kind of memory also says something about what was it of that generation that had that kind of memory. You know, first of all, they had to rely on their memory because it's their survival. He's a merchant. He has to remember numbers. He has to remember who he bought from, who he sold from, who owes him money. He had to remember how to get from place to place because he was born in a time there's no cars, there's no planes. They're getting around in horses, and he's a traveling merchant. So imagine, how is he getting around from countries? Forget about villages on a horse. How is he navigating? So you have to have this very sharp mind to actually help you navigate. Read stars, read the sun, read, landmarks, So that already, that generation, today we're not utilizing our memory as much. And so I look at his story, and it's, for me, it's a way of, we need to rely on our memory more because imagine he lived till 102 and he was very astute. So that was one of the pullaways as well. So he lived through several regime changes. I have a presentation to show you. His life, he shares the last years of the Russian Empire through the rise of the Bolsheviks and the Stalinist purges and political instability across Central Asia. He obtained an Afghan passport in 1943. I have the original passport from 1943. I have, and I'll show it to you in the presentation as well. He describes confiscations and property losses and repeated losses of goods and property under the Soviet system. And these confiscations meant he often had to rebuild his trading business from scratch all the time. And there's no bitterness about it. It was just like, oh, well, this is just the way that it is. He describes moves and migrations. The journal traces the family's migration across Central Asia and Afghanistan. He fled through the mountains into Herat. He had a business acumen, obviously, he had to have. So, Central Asian Jews in general were a merchant class of Jews. We're merchants. That's what we were. He describes the community life as well, the Bukharian Jewish community practices who lived in the community, the Mashadis, the Ashkenazim. He even mentions what the family names. I mean, that's the level of detailed and how many Persian families there are in Merv in Turkmenistan. That's, it's incredible how much he could recall at 90 years old. So the journal for me, why I felt I needed to share the story is it's not just because it's a time capsule of 100 years that virtually nobody knows about. I went to an Ashkenazi day school and I learned all about the Shoah. I didn't even know to inquire about my own history. I didn't even know until this journal and until my mother's life story till I started to delve into that. So this journal teaches resilience, the importance of social networks, the fact that he was stateless, and most Central Asians were stateless. I'm talking early 1900s, was in the irony of it all, was in fact their survival because they had to huddle together. There was no assimilation in Central Asia. Jews stuck together. There was virtually no assimilation. They lived together, they stuck together, they had trade networks across several countries, which I'll share in the presentation as well. They intermarried within this Jewish triangle, and that was their survival as well. Their survival was not the government. Their survival was actually on their trade networks, their community, and their connections. That was their survival. And he goes on to describe. So I'll show you the presentation here as well. Let me show you. Let me go into presentation. Hold on. Slideshow. What are we seeing? Are we seeing it as a presentation or are we seeing my slides? Because I can't see what
You
you're seeing.
can do the slideshow like what we did before, like slideshow and start from play from
Okay.
start on the
Okay.
left. On the
Uh,
left side, there is a button that says
okay, I see it. I see it. I see it. Okay, here we are. You all see it? Okay, perfect. So, um, you'll see, first of all, the title of the book. This is the cover of the book, The Stateless Central Asian Merchant. If you look very closely, that is one of the pages. You'll look at the writing on the journal. I thought that that was very important to put on the cover. Um, that is a photo of my grandfather. That picture of him is taken in Peshawar, uh, which is now Pakistan, but it was part of British India. And to the right, if anybody would like to follow me on Instagram, you can always take your phone and you can zap your phone and follow me on Instagram. I post several times a week stories of my family from Central Asia, 2 3 minute snippet stories. So let me go to the next page. Oh, let me make sure I'm doing this. Here we are. Okay. So here we are. And I want to explain to you. how we got to Central Asia. Most people don't even know what Central Asia is. So here is a map of Central Asia and how we ended up there. So we are part of the first expulsion, known as the Babylonian exile. After Cyrus the Great, we were allowed, so we were dispersed into this greater Persian Empire, which was 132 provinces. And we were there for thousands of years. Now, under Cyrus the Great, he allowed the Jews to return to build the Second Temple. Most Jews did not return. We did not return. So we built extensive trade networks that connected um, Persia with India and the West. So this is actually my ancestry over here. My DNA shows the how it starts off in Israel, which back then was Judea, Samaria, and it actually shows my family's movement as we were expelled. We went up north and then we went towards Central Asia. That's what happened. But my ancestry starts off in Judea, Samaria. So this is, hold on a second. Let me make sure I'm sharing everything. Um, Let me go on to the next slide. Okay, so let me explain to you now what happened and who we are. I am an Afghan Bukharian Jew, which is part of Central Asian Jewry. However, most of the Jews from Central Asia can trace their ancestry to Persia. So, like I said, we were from the Babylonian exile and we landed in this greater Persian Empire. So, I'll just share a little bit of how we migrated to Afghanistan and to Bukhara and what happened. In the mid 18th century, my ancestors were among approximately 40 Jewish families who relocated to the region around Mashhad in northeastern Iran under the orders of Nadir Shah Afshar. Nadir Shah Afshar, sorry. And he was my family, he invited 40 Jewish families because he was a moderate and he wanted to have many different groups of people, Armenians, Christians, Sunnis, and Shiites together. He was looking to build tolerance between these communities. So he invited 40 Jewish families to live in Mashhad in the mid 18th century. My family was invited from central Iran, which is the city of Yazd. So we moved to Mashhad. That's where my ancestry went. What happened is Nadir Shah was assassinated in 1747, and the state protection that had allowed my family to settle in the area weakened. Local hostility increased and the Jewish community became more vulnerable. Then what happens, here we're at this slide, by 1839, hostility culminated in a violent event now referred to as the Al-Adad. That's what we're looking at right now, during which the Jewish community in Mashhad suffered a pogrom and mass forced conversion to Islam. Many Jews were killed and a large number were coerced into converting. Those who remained often adopted outward Muslim identities while maintaining Jewish practices in secret, a phenomenon known as Jadid al-Islam. Basically, they lived as crypto Jews. Many Sephardim have this as well. The Portuguese, the Spanish, they have the crypto Jews as well. The Persians did as well. So what happened is the ones that stayed became crypto Jews. Others fled to neighboring regions where they could live a little bit more openly as Jews, including Herat in Afghanistan and cities in Bukhara and Central Asia. So it started from this pogrom in 1839. My family fled to Herat in Afghanistan, and that's how we end up in Afghanistan. Let me go to the next slide. So here we have Central Asia under Russian rule, 19th century Russia. Okay, so um, the Russian authorities classified the Persian-speaking Jewish population in Turkestan into three different categories. So Turkestan was part of the Russian Empire. Today it's Turkmenistan. Let me see, do we see it here on the map? Yes, we do. It's right here. Oh, what happened? Sorry about that. Right here is Turkestan. Right over here is Turkestan. This becomes Turkmenistan over here. Local Jews who could demonstrate residency in the region prior to the Russian conquest were recognized as Russian citizens. That was not us. Bukharian Jews who had migrated to Russian Turkestan from the Emirate of Bukhara after the conquest, they were still seen as subjects of the emir. By the way, just that you understand, and I'm sharing a lot of history here, Bukharian Jews are not necessarily from Bukhara. The emir of Bukhara, he adopted the peoples from from Kazakhstan, from Kyrgyzstan, from Uzbekistan. He adopted the peoples into his empire, and he called them Bukharian. So it doesn't mean a Bukharian Jew came from Bukhara. Just I'm explaining that to you. And the foreign Jews. The foreign Jews were considered subjects of either Afghanistan or Persia. That was my family. So local and Bukharian Jews could own land and travel without restrictions. My grandmother on my mother's side, which is Caravan of Hope, my mother's life story on my mother's side, is they came from Bukhara, and her grandfather, my mother's grandfather, was a member of the first guild. He was very wealthy. He was also persecuted and sent to a Siberian gulag to die. But they could own at that time land and travel without restrictions at a point. And then you have the Bolshevik Revolution. So some prosperous Jews acquired farmlands while others contributed to modernizing cities with new European style architecture. So some of the prosperous Jews that acquired farmland, for example, was my great grandfather. His name was Benjamin Abramov, and he was a vintner. He made wine until it was confiscated as well. But there was a period of a golden era for Bukharian Jews. There was that period. I'll go to the next slide. Here we have, so my family now, I said to you that my family migrated, and this is all in the journal. I'm just making this into a presentation. The journal is written, he's in his words. So my family moves to Afghanistan, and then what happens is the Persian Qajar takeover of Herat happens because it was a contested border region between Persia and Afghanistan, and the Persian Qajars take over, resulting in many Jews fleeing to Merv in Russian Turkestan. And I'll show you back again. This is Turkestan right over here. This is Turkestan right over here. You can see where I'm pointing. This is Merv right over here. So this becomes Turkmenistan, this whole area. And then if you see here, this is Mashhad over here. So you see it's very close. Iran is very close to Afghanistan, very close to Turkmenistan. It's very close. So my family in 1856, they're in Herat, Afghanistan. And there's a few communities there. There are the Persian Jews who escaped to Afghanistan. And many Persians went back to Mashhad, and some stayed in Afghanistan at that time. Some said, we're staying in Afghanistan, and they moved inland to Kabul. My family, because we're traveling merchants, and my family, what I noticed in the journal is, which you'll understand once you read the journal, is my grandfather rarely waited to be pushed out of a country. He was usually one step ahead of the game. And if there was a whiff of a political issue, they were already seeking other places. He was not afraid to move. He was not feeling uncomfortable. I need to stay here. That for me was a lesson as well, because I think we all get very comfortable, or we all think that um, Jew hatred, which we're seeing now at record numbers, it's not going to affect us. He didn't live that way. They didn't live that way. If there was a whiff of a problem, they picked up and left. Because they're merchants, that's their advantage. They're not afraid to travel. They're not afraid to leave where they're living. They're just circulating around this Jewish triangle, which I'll show you the Jewish triangle. So my family decides to move to Merv in Turkmenistan. And the reason why is because and I think I have it in the next slide. Let me just see here. The reason why they moved to Merv, this is because they built the Trans-Caspian Railway in 1850. This is the railway that was built in Merv. Now, this connected the Russian to the greater Russian Empire. It connected to Mashhad, to Afghanistan, and to Bukhara. Now, if you're a merchant, you want to live next to the train. And this just got built simultaneously with the Qesher takeover in Afghanistan. I know there's a lot of history here that I'm throwing at you. There's a lot here because I'm trying to give you the feeling of how much movement there was and how much movement he's describing in the journal. So my family decides to move to Merv. My grandfather, the one that his journal, he was born in Merv. His parents were also born, no, his parents were married in Merv as well. So understand that Merv is Turkmenistan. At that time, when he was born in 1897, it was Russian Turkestan. Today, it's Turkmenistan. So this is where they go because they want to be next to the train, because they want to be next to mobility. This is their survival. Okay, then we have, this is the Jewish triangle. This is the official term for it. These are three major hubs of Central Asian Jewish life in the late 19th and early 20th century. What you're seeing over there are Bukharian kippahs. Perhaps you've seen that before. This, you'll see, it looks like a triangle. So this is the way my grandfather traveled along this Jewish triangle. Central Asian merchants, they traveled along this Jewish triangle. This is, and you'll see here I labeled the countries: Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. This is Afghanistan. This is Iran over here. You'll see how close Mashhad is to Afghanistan. That's why the Mashhadi Jews ran to Herat. That's why you'll also see that the Mashhadi Jews ran to Merv, because you see how close Merv is. There's a big Persian community in Merv as well. So this was the Jewish triangle. And the way that it worked is that my grandfather, Central Asian merchants, they would travel along this Jewish triangle, and they would travel 6 donkey days. And my grandfather describes this all. I'm just condensing all of this information because he writes it in the journal. They would travel 6 donkey days from one city, one village to the next with merchandise. And they had to learn how to shecht their own, because how do you keep kosher? You're a merchant. They all had to learn by the age of 13 how to shecht chickens while they were traveling. My grandfather spoke about that. His father was a mullah. A mullah is a spiritual leader. Is it like a rabbi? Yeah, well, it's kind of like a rabbi, but a learned person in Central Asia was called a mullah. That's what he was. And he was the butcher for the community as well. So the way that it worked as a traveling merchant is that they formed a transnational merchant and kinship network. So this was their survival. Now, my grandfather is stateless. He doesn't have any kind of citizenship. So the way that it worked is you have to get smuggled out through the mountains. You have to go inconspicuously. You have to travel at night with horses sometimes. That's the way that it was. And he describes it all in the journal. Now, you want to get married. this is what happens is that because you're a traveling merchant and you're not staying somewhere very long, what happens is as you're traveling from city to city and you meet a lovely lady from a lovely family, let's say from Kabul, you want to travel now to Bukhara because which my grandfather did. He traveled to Bukhara for business. So you meet a lovely lady, and it was a very fast courtship. There was no there. It all had to be a fast courtship. It was, do we have the same values? Do our families know each other? Um, you want to have they all wanted to have children. That wasn't a question, and basically that's it. We're good to go. And then the wedding was like a month later. And he describes that as well with his marriage to my grandmother. It was basically as fast as that. So now imagine this is the way that it worked is that her family might be from Bukhara, and let's say there's trouble in Kabul. So the way that it worked is their survival was relying on their trade networks. And now he could travel to Bukhara because he knew someone there, because there was family over there. So this is how this community, this triangle was stayed close. And this was their survival. This is how they did it. And there was somebody that always knew somebody. If a male wants to get married, oh, I know someone from this community and you're traveling over there. It was really as simple as that. It was not very complicated. So this is called the Jewish triangle. What's interesting about this is that I learned as I was writing this journal is that they all the Jews married within this triangle, they all married within each other. So Afghan would marry Bukharian, Bukharian would marry Persian. They all married within each other. The interesting thing is that when they all left Central Asia, is when everybody started to um, separate themselves into communities. Bukharians are now a Bukharian community. The Afghans were a very nothing community, the Afghans, so we kind of accepted almost anybody. But the Persians, the Mashadis in particular, they also kept to themselves. But interestingly enough, over there, it wasn't like that. They all actually married within each other because that was their survival. It's only when they left Central Asia did they not intermarry anymore, which I found very interesting. And this was all information that I extracted as I was doing the journal. Here is what a caravanserai looks like in Merv, Turkmenistan, which my grandfather spoke about as well. So a caravanserai, and the short version of caravanserai is called sarai. So basically what this is, what you're looking at, this is where they conducted business. This was a fortress of two levels. The first level is where they would set up shop. You'll see here, they would set up shop. Over here along the stalls, over here, they would set up shop and they would also have a place for their animals. You'll see here camels, donkeys, horses that would have place here for the animals. And then on the second floor, they would stay there. So they would conduct, so it was kind of like a hotel flea market space, and they would stay there, and they would stay there either 3 days out of the week, 2 days out of the week. It was not a 7 day a week endeavor. And then they would pack up on their horses or camels, on their goods, and then they would go to the next sarai in another city. So this is how they conducted trade over here. Now, this is a fortress. What you don't see is that in front of this courtyard is a big gate to get in. So because they have to lock the goods because everyone's keeping merchandise over here. So this is how they conducted business over here in these caravanserais. This was dotted all over Central Asia were these sarais, all over. And one of the interesting thing is you see here this big dome. So, if you wonder like how did they navigate? How did they know where to go? These domes were to help you navigate. Oh, I'm going there. I'm going to that sarai. I'm going over there because there's no ways. There's no maps. There's no signs that are saying caravanserai, Merv, Turkmenistan, that direction. So it was these big domes that would help people also navigate where to go. This is what a compound I told you about my great grandfather, Benjamin Abramov. His nickname was Amin Kabuli because the nickname for Benjamin is Amin. And he lived in Afghanistan. That's why he was Kabuli. The last name went according to either your profession or where you came from. So he was, his last name was Abramov, but he was Benjamin Abramov Kabuli. He was the one that came from Kabul. So that's the nickname that they gave him. He was a very wealthy um, member of the first guild. This is my grandmother's father. My grandfather spoke about him extensively in the journal because he was the one that purchased a lot of farmland in Samarkand and he built this vineyard and my grandfather extensively talks about the entire vineyard business in Samarkand and who he was supplying spirits to Muslims as well, to Russians as well. He was extremely wealthy. So this is what the compound looked like. You'll see here, and this is only just one, it's as big as a city block, the compound. It's very hard to tell in this photo, but it is as large as a city block. My great grandfather had three wives and 18 children. And my grandfather writes about every single child by name and what happened to each one of them. I mean, that's how lucid his memory was. So this was the compound. They all lived together in this compound. This is in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, and this is just a small portion of it. In this compound was a Bet Knesset, was a synagogue, was a grand ballroom for parties. Um, there were I don't remember how many rooms he said. There were several rooms, several families that were living here all together. But um, it served like what a synagogue would serve as today. That's what it served like. And the wealthy Bukharian Jews, like my great grandfather, they were always looking, and this is something I found very beautiful as well in the journal when a Bukharian Jew was very wealthy, it wasn't about building wealth for themselves. This compound was not about building wealth for himself. This was for the community. The wealth was to build to help the community. That's how they thought. If I'm rich to share this. I'm rich to share this with the community. That was another big message that I got. In fact, my great grandfather's Amin Kabuli is one of the founders of Shkunat Bukhara in Israel. Because when they made money in the early 19th century, they took their money and they bought land in Israel and they built Shkunat Bukhara. So they were always thinking, first of all, they felt a very deep connection to the ancestral homeland today Israel, present day Israel. Back then it was Ottoman Palestine. They were traveling there. That was the other thing my grandfather wrote about, that they were actually traveling in the early 1900s by camel, by horse, by train, by boat, making that trek all the way from Central Asia to Israel. It took probably 2 months to get there. More than once he did that trek. And what they did is they brought my great grandparents, brought back two Sefer Torah, two Sefer Torah. They wrapped it in bolts of fabric to make it look like they were bringing in textile because you could not bring a Sefer Torah into Afghanistan. So they wrapped it in bolts of fabric and they smuggled it into Afghanistan. The level of dedication that they had to Judaism and to the community, and they brought back books from Israel to share with the community because they needed books for the school. So this compound served as it's like a modern Jewish community center, even though that's where they lived. So just to show you the mutual responsibility the community felt for each other. Then we have here, this was the vineyard of my grandfather, my great grandfather. This was the actual vineyard. Over here, you'll see here the workers carrying up these barrels of grapes over here. This is the early 1900s in Samarkand over here. And Merv and Samarkand go through rapid changes in power between Bolshevik and pro-Tsarist forces. During this upheaval, the new communist authorities confiscate the Abramov family's winery and other property in both cities. This happened to both sides of my family. On my mother's side and my father's side, the property was just confiscated. That's what happened. The communists, they went after the wealthy. Either they killed you or they put you in the gulag. And that's what they did. And they confiscated everything for themselves. So this is what happens. Um, this is the community that they built in Israel. It's called Shchunat Bukhara. So, like I said, when they made money in the 1890s, Jews from Afghanistan, Persia, and Central Asia established the Bukharian Jewish neighborhood outside the walls of Jerusalem. This is what it looked like. All of this is shared in the journal. He goes into great detail of all of this. And it just also goes to show you the connection that they have to their yearning to go to their homeland is so strong. And they're already building foundation there because they're always thinking to themselves, we need to have a place in our homeland. They know that anything can change on a dime. They want to be ready and they want to go back to their ancestral homeland. So they're already building there from 1890. But it's incredible that dedication that they took. This is my family in Samarkand in 1912. So this picture, I believe, is my grandfather. This is my grandfather here. Just want to make sure. This is my grandfather over here. And most likely this is his bar mitzvah. You'll notice his father is not in this photo. What happened is my family was deported from Merv to Samarkand. And my grandfather had his bar mitzvah in Samarkand. Here he is right over here in Samarkand. The authorities found out about the bar mitzvah. They arrested his father and deported him to Asterabad in Persia. That's what happened here. And you'll see here, look at, and this is my great grandmother. So this is his mother. Her name is Hannah, right over here. And she's with the youngest child over here. And you can see these girls, which are his sisters, they don't look to me older than 15. I mean, they were already married. Look at them. They're already married with children. And you had to get married very young because the way that it was over there is that you had to protect your girls from a Muslim kidnapping your daughters, and then you wouldn't see her again. And then she would be married off into a Muslim family. And it did happen. And my grandfather spoke about that as well. You know, his sister was married off at 12 years old. That was not a good situation, what happened to his sister. You can read the journal to learn more about that. This is my great grandfather, Rachamim Abramov, in 1914 in front of the pyramids. This is my great grandfather that traveled all the way from Afghanistan through Egypt to buy books for the Jewish community and bring them back to Afghanistan. It's really incredible at the amount of effort and dedication that they had, that they did this. So he was probably gone for 6 months. And this is my great grandfather that smuggled the two Sefer Torahs back into Afghanistan in bolts of fabric. Then what happens here is in the early 1920s, we have the Basmachi revolt against Soviet power and unrest through Central Asia. They're a bunch of bandits against Russian imperial powers. These are Basmachi fighters over here. And this causes, and my grandfather spoke about a Jewish man from the community that joins this Basmachi revolt group. He gets swept up in this. And you'll have to read the journal to read what happened. But this young man shot a Jewish woman, and read the journal what they did to this young Jewish man because they found him, they caught him, and they practiced their own law within themselves. They did not go to the police and report this. They handled it amongst themselves. That's what they did. Then we have over here, This is just an example of my grandfather got stuck. He was going from Afghanistan to Baku in Azerbaijan. And he went with a customs officer to help him bring merchandise. Somehow, someone ratted out my grandfather that he had merchandise. My grandfather believes that it was actually the customs officer that was supposed to be protecting him. That's what he wrote in the journal. And my grandfather, and they confiscated everything. So he ends up in Baku, Azerbaijan in 1919, and he only managed to, and they confiscated everything. So imagine now he's a traveler, he has nothing. He doesn't even have a place to sleep. He managed, he said, to keep one carpet to sell. So he slept, he was homeless for a while until he met somebody that knew someone from the family in Samarkand. And he said, "Don't worry, I'll give you work. You can start working for me." And slowly, slowly, he built himself up. But these stories are prevalent stories throughout the journal. I just wanted to give you an example of what was happening. And then he just got stuck in Baku and he just started working for somebody. And that's the way that it was. This is Kabul in Afghanistan, just to give you what it looked like. This is Rosh Hashanah. So typical, we wear something called a jama. This is my grandfather was in the silk trade. So they're wearing silk brocade, and he was in caracal skin business. This is a caracal hat. This is my grandfather here. This is my father here. These are his sisters, my grandmother. Oh, that went back. And this is the actual passport, the first passport that my grandfather got in 1943. He was 41 years old, and you'll notice, look at this passport very carefully. It says that he was born in Herat. He was not born in Herat. Most likely the date, it says here date, it just gives his year. It doesn't even give an actual birth date. It's just a year, and it goes by the solar year. It's 1270. You know what his business is, what neighborhood. It's called the Baba Kudai neighborhood. The destination was Peshawar, and he's listed as a businessman. So this passport from 1943 originally was 40 pages. He kept this passport. He had to renew this passport for 40 years. This same passport was renewed for 40 years, and what started out as 40 pages ended up as 200 pages with hundreds and hundreds of stamps from all over the world. So this is the first time that he gained citizenship. He most likely bought this citizenship, which is what you did. Um, in 1947, we're coming to the end of the presentation. In 1947, my grandfather was already thinking in the 1940s. He was already saying to himself in Afghanistan, because there was trouble where we were in World War II, there's trouble. And he's already saying to himself that I think I should buy land in Palestine. The British mandate, it was Palestine back then, today modern day Israel. I think I should buy land. And he traveled from India to Israel in 1947, before the state gained its independence. The Arab-Israeli War broke out, and he bought this land in Tel Aviv. And he said, okay, I'm stuck here. I can't leave. I might as well build on this property. So he built this building right here that we're looking at, and it's still in my family, this building in Tel Aviv. He built this in 1947. So he got stuck there and he just said, okay. And that was his attitude with everything. Wherever he got stuck, he didn't fret. He wasn't trying to get out. He just said, let me do what I can do here while I'm here. Wherever he went, also, my family bought property in every country they did business. In India, in Thailand, in Italy, in Israel, in Switzerland, wherever they went, they never fretted. They just said, okay, we're here, let's do business. They were also looking to mitigate risk all the time. So that's why they kept on buying all this property and opening up more and more offices. And the more offices they opened, the more the business was expanding. My grandfather ended up living 25 years in Japan in the diamond and pearl business. So this is what he built, and I'm trying to show you that Central Asian Jews were very connected to the land of Israel. We're getting to the end here. This is the last slide over here. This is the business card of the family business in Italy, in Switzerland, in Israel. I'm showing you this is all of the places that we had homes. And the way that it worked is each uncle of mine would go live in one of these countries. So I had family all over the world, and that's how they built this business and they built this empire. So they were fearless. They were not afraid to go anywhere. And that was our survival. This is my family here in Italy, and my family still lives in Italy. This is my grandfather here. This is my grandmother. It was because of my grandmother, because everything was confiscated by the Bolsheviks. It was my grandmother that said, I heard that Switzerland never has war. I think we should buy a place in Switzerland. So we ended up buying a place in Chiasso, Switzerland, and opening up an office over there because she was always thinking, how do we mitigate risk? And these are just some photos of my grandfather over here in Taipei in the 1960s. What you're looking at is, so already in the 1960s, he's traveling, he's in the tea business. Anything that he could get his hands on, he was doing. Then he was traveling to Iran in the 1970s. That's turquoise. That's what he was doing in Iran. I think this is the last. Oh, this is the journal. This is my grandfather now as an old man here. And this is the actual journal. So you'll see what I mean. Look at how he uses the space. You can't, you can't see periods. You can't tell. And it's going from right to left. And he's using every inch of space. Just look at how he wrote. It's pretty remarkable, and that he started to write his life story at 90. This book went on 100 pages. He filled 100 pages of detail. Everything I just shared with you is in the journal. Actually, is in the journal. I think this is the last page. Let me see. Yes, this is the last page. Let me get out of this. Stop sharing. So I hope that was interesting for you. If
Thank you,
any,
Dahlia. It was fascinating, and I see so many comments in the chat that are writing how fascinating all this story is, and even someone wrote, I think that it should have been made into a movie, which I think you mentioned to us that
yeah,
you
that's how I
also.
saw it originally. I saw it in my head as a movie.
Yeah, and I really think that it's so unknown for so many of us, and there's so much detail, and I feel like when you speak about your grandfather, it's like it lives like he lived 100 lives, like
Yes,
like all
yes,
the stories and all the places that it's been. It just feels like it cannot be one person's one life. Like it's
yes.
so
And it's a message for us. For me, I saw that and I said, if he can do it, and he never complained and he was never bitter, and they survived, he's giving us a guidebook how we can do it. For me, that's how I saw it. He gave me a guidebook how we can do it. We need to stick together. We need to help each other. We need to have mutual responsibility towards each other. We can't have this individualistic lifestyle. Does not work. That's not how they survived. So for me, I saw it as a manual book on how, because if they survived for thousands of years in those situations, this is how we're going to do it too. Sorry to
amazing. So
interrupt
I'll
because,
read some questions that came in
okay,
because
go ahead.
there are quite a few. Which year was the vineyard confiscated?
19, it might have been in the early 1900s. It might have been around uh, maybe 1905. We're not sure. We're not sure because we can't even find, we were looking for the vineyard in Samarkand. We're looking for it. There's other vineyards there. We don't know if that was the place. We did so much research to find this vineyard, but we think it was around 1905 that the vineyard was confiscated.
Thank you. There were quite a few questions about the Caucasus and Kafkazi Jews. So just if you want to speak a bit about them, and there was one specific question whether there was merchant connection between Bukharan and the mountain Kafkazi Jews. You did mention Baku, where your grandfather
Right. So
grew
my
up, but
grandfather, he
like
traveled to
how were they part of this Jewish triangle?
my grandfather did not speak much about the Baku Jews. He didn't speak much. What he did say is that there were Bukharians that were living in Baku. And because there were Bukharians living in Baku and even some Afghan Jews that were living in Baku, that helped him get him back on his feet. That was the extent of, so he didn't describe the Kafkazi Jews. He didn't. He said that these were the connections that he had were with the Jews from Samarkand and from Afghanistan. That was the trade network.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The next question is from Stephanie. Would it be safe to assume there were trusted merchants they dealt with in each place they went to, so that goods would go from one merchant with their six donkey days of travel to the next merchant who would take them further on and so forth? And that they have established mutual financial mechanisms. So if you
Okay, so this is it's okay. First of all, I'll try to break this down. My grandfather was always with his merchandise. In the times that he wasn't with his merchandise, the reason he ended up in Bukhara is because for safekeeping, because they had to leave Merv, he kept his merchandise in a warehouse with someone from the community that he knew in Bukhara, and he wrote about this. So he kept it in a warehouse in Bukhara, and what happened was um, that answers that question. So for the most part, though, my grandfather was with his merchandise. He was traveling with his merchandise because he needs it. He describes a story where he is traveling on the road, and he has porcelainware with him, and the truck breaks down, and they're in the middle of nowhere. So he said, "Oh well, I might as well sell my merchandise off the truck." And that's what he did. He just started selling his merchandise off the truck in the middle of the road. So I'm just trying to give you a flavor of how it was. Just, but that's what it was. Did they generally trust? Yeah, they only worked generally with people that they trusted. My grandfather also did work with Muslims. Generally speak, my grandfather was offered a position with the Minister of Finance in Afghanistan as well because he was a merchant as well. There were periods that there was a pretty good relationship with the Afghans, Muslims, and it depended who was in power when and that's really what it came down to, and that's why they constantly had to move because, and by the way, this is the way power shifted. He got assassinated. That's pretty much how it was. Not my grandfather, God forbid. I'm talking about how the king would just get assassinated, and it would be by the nephew. Very tribal. That's how it was over there. So
think,
it was not a linear experience. It was up and down. So I gave you a very big, full picture.
great.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. And was the commerce only within Jewish communities? You mentioned now a bit that they also traded with Muslims, but what
So
was?
this is in the journal. My grandfather wrote extensively about this. The Afghans wanted to control the business of the Jews. So they made the Jews buy the merchandise through the Afghan bank. So in other words, so all of the money had to be funneled through the Afghan bank. This was to help, obviously, Afghanistan. And what do you think happened with the money that was in Afghanistan bank?
Was confiscated?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. It got confiscated. And this happened all the time. All of the Jewish merchants, the money was gone.
Yeah, it's crazy how many times also your grandfather writes about failed businesses or people cheating
Right.
on him, on them, people doing
And
like,
he just and this
and
is
then he just
life.
goes on and
And
starts
he
the
just
next
goes
one.
on and there's no complaining. It's just life. Okay, start again. What are you supposed to do? Just give up? You
Yeah,
just and
it's
for
really
me that's a
fascinating.
message. Start again. But obviously the end story is he lived till 102, and my family built a massive empire. And that's the big story is that you can easily say feel defeated, but you just keep on pushing, keep on pushing, keep on pushing. Eventually, now you have children. You put the children in the business. They have children. You put them in the business and you start to grow this business with all its tentacles, which is what happened.
There's a comment that his writing pattern reminds our commenter of the Torah, like how it's written from edge to edge, no paragraphs, no punctuation.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Maybe that's really the influence. Maybe that's a good observation. Maybe.
Could be. How did Ashkenazi Zionism affect their beliefs and desire to live in Israel?
Explain what that means. If someone can explain,
I'm
what does
not
that
sure.
mean?
So,
You can
Deborah, if
elaborate.
you.
I know that when my family did move to Israel, I can just share this with you, and this is in Caravan of Hope, which is my mother's life story. When my family did move to Israel, they were in shock because in Afghanistan and in Bukhara, when they lived there, there is no such thing as not being observant. It doesn't exist. It was not even in their head. My mother told me that if someone sinned, or if someone opened up did something by accident on Shabbat, the community would fast. That's how observant they were over there. So when they went to Israel, they were in shock in the 1948, 1949. They were in shock because they thought they're coming to a country of religious Jews and kosher. So they were in shock. And what happened is initially my family, they dropped a little. They were not as religious. They dropped a little. That's what happened. That was the influence that they had. They dropped a little.
Hmm. Thank you. I see that there are still many questions, so I'll try to summarize them quickly. What's the story of your family arriving to the US?
My my mother lived in Afghanistan in up until 1948, 49, and there was and my uncle was doing business with the American consulate in Afghanistan. And the American consulate introduced my uncle to an American couple that was building the roads in Afghanistan. He was a road engineer. His name is Lenny Abrams. He's in the book Caravan of Hope. They happen to be Jewish, and their last name happened to be Abram, but they're Ashkenazi Jews. They were a childless couple that moved to Kabul, this married couple, and through the embassy, my uncle met them because they were American and he was a road engineer. And they were fascinated to find Jewish people in Afghanistan. So my family invited them to our house for every single uh, um, holiday, every single Jewish holiday. They became part of the family, and they eventually moved to back to New York, which is where they were living. And from that point, my family didn't know what America was. They didn't know. It was because of them that they said, eventually, that's where we want to be. We want to be in New York. And it was through this couple's encouragement. She was my godmother. Ethel and Lenny Abrams, they were like grandparents to me. It was through this couple that they introduced us, my family, to America. So that's how we ended up there.
Thank you. Have you visited Central Asia at all? And do you have any experience with these places?
No. I say this blushing. No, my intention is to go there. I have not been there. Obviously, I'm very enthusiastic. I have to find the right slot of time in my life to go and spend good time over there. By the way, Uzbekistan has a very good relationship with Israel today. It's a very big tourist attraction for Israelis, just by
Yeah,
the
it's
way.
been it's been a popular destination to
And
go
very
to.
safe. Everyone tells me it's very, very safe and there's kosher food there.
Thank you. How did you feel reading this without knowing the stories or knowing there was family all over the world?
How did I?
Yeah, I just read this and I think I'll rephrase
Yeah,
it. How I guess how did it feel to read the journal of your grandfather?
the minute I read it, I felt like it had to be published. I saw it as a movie, and I felt very empowered and very proud of my heritage. And I felt like this needed to be shared in the Jewish historical world. It needs to be shared because a lot of the stories I grew up with are Ashkenazi tragic stories. This, it could have been tragic, but he doesn't see himself as a victim. He doesn't see himself that way. He just keeps on pushing through. So I felt as I was reading this, this is an empowering story, and I felt like this is very inspiring for that, and that's how I felt. Very inspired. I mean, I think you can see it in how I even present it. I'm
Absolutely.
inspired by his life and what he went through, and it just goes to show who are we to complain? We have it good. Really, that's how I felt. And it's just like I wanted to share the story.
Amazing. Did your grandfather mention any anti-Semitism from the local Muslim communities at all in the Triangle or elsewhere?
No, he did not. The only thing, there were a couple of episodes where he mentions they had to memorize the Muslim conversion sentence. There's a line. He had to memorize that to protect himself in case he was accosted. My father did describe, my father knew this sentence. I don't know the sentence, but he knew the sentence. He even said it to me in his very old age. It was very ingrained. It was a sentence you had to know to protect you. My father said that he was harassed as a child by the Muslims. And in my book, Caravan of Hope, my mother describes the harassment her family went through with the Afghans. The children used to pick on each other. They were horrible. The Muslim children with the Jewish kids, they would throw stones at them. They couldn't go to school. My mother could not go to school. Nobody could go to school because they would harass you. So that was the kind of if you wanted, there was not even a word for it. They just knew we shouldn't be mixing with Muslims. That's how they framed it.
Thank you. How many languages did your grandfather speak?
Probably 10. Probably,
Which
seriously,
ones?
probably 10. Probably 10. Urdu, Pashto, uh, Japanese, I mean, probably 10. Hebrew, Persian, I mean, 10 languages. Russian, probably 10 languages, And when you're a merchant, my family is a lot of my family members are polyglots. Because when you're a merchant and you're traveling, you need to pick up languages. To do business. You pick up here and there. That's just the way that it was. That's their survival. That's why he could be so lucid at 90 years old because your brain is functioning. Today we're not using our brain in the same way. We're just like, let me Google it. That's really what's happening. They don't have Google. They have to rely on their brain. It's their
That's right.
survival. So I look at that and I'm like, I try not to use waste. And I try to like use your brain, so that you don't get rusty. Because if he lives till 102 and generally in good health, I want to say too.
Thank you. Have you heard of the Sassoons and the Kaduris of Iraq? And I'll just add to that question whether there was connection between the trade networks of the Baghdadi Jews of Southeast Asia and
There
the
was, there
Central
was,
Asian Jews.
there was. I only know about this because of my father, because when you read the journal, you'll discover that my father and mother ended up living in Bombay, India. And who were in Bombay, India? The Baghdadi Jews. So that's how, and the Baghdadi Jews also happened to be in Bombay. So the Sassoon family were in Bombay, in Japan, sorry, where my grandfather lived. So there, we did know the Sassoon family also from Japan as well, and then from India. So it was a very big trade network.
Thank you. Was Hayes involved in bringing the family to the US?
No, my family came with financially intact. That's they came um, financially intact. They were economically doing well already when they came to America. And when they came to America, this is another thing that I'll share with everyone here. They came to America, there was no synagogue for them. They went and built a synagogue. And I talk about that in Caravan of Hope in my mother's life story. And that just goes to show they weren't like, where is Chabad? Let's go look for a Chabad who can take care of us. They were like, no, we need to build a community. We're going, and then 1979, when the Persian Jews fled Iran, my family helped all of them because they didn't have who to help them in New York. So this is the mutual responsibility that they all had for each other. So my parents built the synagogue. They also built a synagogue in Bangkok, Thailand, which still exists today. Wherever they went, they said, "How do we build?" They weren't looking to be taken care of.
With
That's
the
another important
synagogue.
message. And that you read in the journal as well. That's like this is the recipe for survival. Roll up your sleeves and help.
Thank you. And we'll slowly close because
Yes.
we're a bit out of time, but I'll just read one more question. It was the synagogue, the Bet Gabriel in Forest Hills.
No, it wasn't. It was the Queens Jewish Center, Sephardic in Queens, 67th Drive on Queens Boulevard. Um,
Great.
so
Thank you. There
somebody
were a few
obviously is
questions
from
about
that
that.
synagogue.
People want to locate
No,
the
my
synagogue.
parents came before that synagogue. There was no
Okay.
Buharian community when my parents came. My parents came in the 1950s. There was no Buharian community yet. So my parents came before, just
And a
sharing.
bunch of people are saying that that's their synagogue and they've been to that synagogue. So just to tell you about that.
I've met family members here that I'm like, oh, you also are related to my great grandfather? I mean, he did have 18 children, is possible.
Could be. So thank you so much, Dahlia, and thank you everyone for all your enthusiasm and lovely comments. I see that there are a lot of comments, Dahlia. Please
Yeah.
look into the chat and see how many people are congratulating you and your presentation
Oh, do I get to read it after we finished? Can I show
yeah, we
you the
can send
chat?
it to you. We
Okay,
can
you'll
send it
send
to
me
you.
the
Don't
chat so I
worry.
can, because I'd love to read the questions. I don't see the questions here.
Yeah, we'll send them to you. So thank you, everyone. It's so nice to
Thank
see
you. Thank
you.
you for joining us today.
And of course, as always, tomorrow we'll send out the recording of this talk. We'll send out also where you can buy Dahlia's books, both this one, but also the Caravan of Hope or her other books. So you might find them interesting as well. Um, so thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Dahlia, for this wonderful,
It was my
fascinating
pleasure.
presentation.
Thank you, Dahlia, for a wonderful presentation.
Oh,
Very enlightening. I want to get the
oh, here
book. both
it is. Here
both
it
books. Thank you.
is.
Thank
Here
you.
it is. Enjoy.
Thank you so much. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing your story with us and with the world. Really fantastic. So unique.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought so too. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining, and we hope to see you all soon. We have two more events coming up this week. On Thursday, we'll talk about Kaunas in Lithuania, so a bit back to the Ashkenazi areas. But on Sunday, those of you who are interested in this topic, we'll have a talk about the Jews of Iran, which will be a two-part session, but you can attend them independently. But we really recommend to join and understand more about the Persian Jews and the Iranian Jews and their fascinating history. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Dahlia.
Oh, and one more thing also about the
Yes.
book, in case you don't want to read it, you can get it on Audible or you can get it. So I just want you to know that you can also listen to it. It's not just a book, and you can get it also online. You can just read it on Kindle. So I just wanted to share the two other formats available because some people like to
Amazing.
listen.
Yeah,
And
it's
the
true.
narrator
That
to the
usually
book
comes
is
up as a question.
the narrator I
Um,
have on this book is phenomenal. So in case
wonderful.
anybody wants.
Thanks so much for letting us know of that option too. So thank you, Dahlia, and thank you, everyone. We wish you a wonderful rest of the day, and we hope to see you all soon. And read. It's always lovely to find out about these books, and we recommend to go ahead and read them.
This was wonderful. So
Thank
much
you.
high energy.
Oh,
Thank you.
So
yes.
much. Bye.
Yes.
Thank
Oh,
you.
boy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Terry, for sharing that. Thank you. You can see I'm enthusiastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
Dora.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.